Hello everyone and welcome to the History of English Part 4, the final version, when we finally get to modern English. So, quick recap through history. England got invaded by some Anglo-Saxons or Germans, and then some Vikings, and then some Latin-speaking religious folk, and then the French were in there, and now we're going to have two more sort of events, major events, and then we're going to be there, modern English. So here we are. And two things really need to happen from the 1500s on to give us the language that we have today, as opposed to Middle English, which we looked at last time with the strange spelling. The first is the life of this man. Everybody knows this is William Shakespeare, and he did wonderful things for the English language, first showing the rest of the world that English was worth using and learning, because before that people were like, English, oh, not a learned language. But Shakespeare showed people that it was pretty awesome. He also gave us a bunch of words. He was like, there's not a word for that. Here it is. About 3,000 words or so he created. And in addition to Shakespeare, the other thing that helped English out is the invention of the printing press. All of a sudden, it was no longer about handwriting. The way that you wrote it down was the way, in theory, that the printer printed it, and then printed books began to get copied a lot. So English was spread out all over the place, and it got a little bit more solidified when it came to things like spelling and structure. So when we look at this, this is a famous Shakespeare poem. This is Shall I Compare Thee to a Summer's Day, one of his sonnets, number 18. So if you look at this thing, you're like, oh, I got most of these. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? So thee is an old word for you. Funny story. You used to be thee and thou, right? Those are the words. But what happened is printers ran out of letters and they used to run out of T's and H's because we use those a lot. So what they would do is put in a placeholder, and the placeholder should in theory be a letter that you don't use all the time. So when printers ran out of T's and H's, they would reach for the least used letter in English, which was a Y. And they started putting Y's in there. And they knew that it was a placeholder. They were like, no one's going to actually say ye. They would still know that we meant thee. They just know that we ran out of Y, and we ran out of T's and H's. Yeah, except within a few years, people started just saying it that way. So the transfer from thee to you, right, thou to you or ye, was a mistake. People read it in books and were like, oh, I guess we're not saying thee anymore. New thing all the kids are doing is ye. So there you have it. So when you see, you know, ye olde bookshop or whatever, it's like, yeah, it's supposed to be a TH. Anyway, if you look at the rest of this, you're like, thou art more lovely. U's and V's, still an issue, not going to get resolved for a little while, but you get the idea, more temperate, you know. So I'm comparing this lovely woman to a summer's day, and she's more beautiful and more temperate and more comfortable temperatures. Rough winds do shake. Ooh, FSV, what a mess, but the rest is fine. The darling buds of May, we don't know how to spell that yet, we haven't decided. And summer's lease, yeah, summer, still going to shift a little bit. Hath is an old word, it's going to go away, become has. All too short a date, right? Summer doesn't last very long. And sometime too hot, the eye of heaven shines. So the eye of heaven, we live in Florida, that's the sun, and sometimes it's too hot. So you are awesome because you're not as windy as May, and summer doesn't last very long. And sometimes the sun's too hot. And often is his gold complexion dim, so sometimes it's cloudy. And every fair from fair sometime declines, by chance or nature's changing course untrimmed. This is a great line. So the idea is that when you first meet someone, they're like fair, like ah, you know, it's wonderful. But then when you see that person like day in, day out over time, eventually they're like fair just becomes fair. Like it was really great, but you're used to it, so now it's just fair. So he says that that is not going to happen, right? Because every fair from fair, so every like fair from fair sometimes declines. So you used to be like, what? These are the best crackers ever. And now you're like, oh, it's just crackers. But he says to this lady, right, thy eternal summer shall not fade, nor lose possession of the fair thou owest. So you'll always be fair, awesome to him. You're again with the F's and the S's, it's a little sketchy. Fair meaning lovely or beautiful, right? Still has an E on it. Owest, we're being poetic here, that you own. Nor shall death brag, thou wanderest in his shade. You're never gonna look like, you know, you're on death's doorstep. When in eternal lines to time thou growest when you get old. So long as men can breathe or eyes can see, so long lives this, and this gives life to thee. So it's the poem. Like, as long as people are alive to see this poem, you'll still be wonderful and beautiful. And clearly it worked, because here we are, and we're still talking about how wonderful and beautiful this woman was, 400 years down the road. So as far as early modern English, which is the spelling and pronunciation that Shakespeare would have used, this is what you end up with. Now, from the 17th century on, English does what it does best, which is we steal words from other places and we just add them in, or we just make new noises, and we're like, yeah, yeah, that's a thing now. So we get to modern English, and of course, I love the 80s. So I don't know if you remember, but Modern English was an 80s band, and they wrote the song, I'll Melt With You, right? I'll stop the world and melt with you. That was them. So there they are, Modern English. Okay, nerding over. And then we just add new words all the time. We're like, fist bump, cougar, crowdsourcing, parkour, French, we'll steal it, it's fine. Tsunami, it's awesome. We'll just take that word. So we make up new words, we make up new sounds, tweet, twerk, things like that. And we add them to our dictionary, stuff like, bruh, or fat shame, butt dial, mic drop. So we add new turns of phrase constantly, or we steal sounds from other places, and that's how English continues to develop. Other countries, other languages have governing boards, and they tell you what words are acceptable to use in that language. English was like, no, no, just you make that noise, a lot of people make that noise, and you think it all means the same thing? All right, cool, that's a new word in English. Whereas the French are like, no, no, you will not make that noise, or we will not acknowledge what that noise means. So they have language boards. English, we're like, yeah, whatever, sounds good, make the noise. But if you've ever wondered why English seems very complicated, it's because it is, and it's because it has the different language rules and origins for all of the different people that conquered England. So sometimes when you look at English, you uncover a little bit of Norse, that's that Anglo-Saxon German, some Latin for our grammar, because the monks wrote it down and they were like, it will fit in the grammar for Latin. And we're like, no, nice try though. And a lot of French, because we absorbed a bunch of that. But this has been the history of English, and I hope you have a lovely day.